Hey everyone, welcome to the Arcane Gate. I'm Dinaru.
And I am Tony, Charles Walker, and today we are joined by MortanisTV, another awesome D&D creator. Why don't you introduce yourselves, buddy?
Hello, I am MortanisTV, as noted. I've been working with the Hobo Slayers for the last couple of years. I've been doing their bi-monthly D&D stream over on their channel. I'm doing a bit of D&D on mine, starting a new campaign next week, and I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons for slightly about 3 decades.
Nice.
Wow.
It's a bit of a time.
You definitely got that on us, because me and Dinaru have only been playing it's been about 5 years for both of us, hasn't it? We started around the same time.
What year is it?
This has been a long 2020, but yeah.
Time compression.
Either 5 or 6 or 7-ish. Yeah.
Yeah.
Not past 10 yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we started in 2014, so yeah, I'd say around that ballpark. Yeah, so I briefly know 3.5, but mainly know 5th edition. You started in 2nd edition Advanced D&D, right?
Yep, AD&D 2E, the second reprint of it, like a year after it came out. I actually have vague memories of when it launched.
Awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. How was that? Because I always hear a lot of people. I hear a lot of people say 2nd edition was kind of like a golden age in itself of D&D. I hear a lot of people say it's one of the better editions.
Rose-colored glasses and nostalgia. I mean, I have a fond spot for it in my heart. It's what got me into tabletop gaming and a lifelong passion. But being perfectly honest, the game system was just psychotically crazy all over the place. And when they say that it is chart heavy, when you've got lookup charts for whether or not you can walk and chew bubble gum at the same time, and then you have to cross-reference it on a pollen count chart in order to make sure that you're not going to swallow your gum and die. I mean, everything in 2nd edition was crazy. Absolute crunchy mathematics, but it was just that golden era is a really good term. It was just wonderful. Everything was firing on all cylinders. It was just a really bad game, but it was a entertaining game. Bad system, perfect game. So
That's fair.
And that's the thing also is, at the time, like, as long as you're having fun, but I guess getting newer people into the system was a little difficult at the time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, when there's just so many different rules that you have to pay attention. I mean, until the standardization with D20 and going on from there, every single mechanic worked in completely different ways. So trying to remember everything was just the old DM screen was just absolutely chock full of charts. It looked like an Excel spreadsheet. So it was a bit difficult, but once you got into the groove, it was a great system. It had a lot of love behind it. All the splat books are just absolutely phenomenal. There were the brown paper soft covers that had just about everything: the complete guide to humans, the complete guide to elves, blah blah blah. And it was a time made with love. And then the game just got too complicated for its own good. They just kept adding new rules, and it just bloated itself to death. So I love it, just not a great system.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, it's something I hear about 3.5 a lot, where I hear 3.5 is like that, but not to the most insane sense. I hear usually 3.5 was the better end of that, where it's incredibly complicated and there's a lot to it, but there's also a lot you can do with all of them options you have, but can be a little overwhelming at times for new people.
Yep, I would tend to agree. The D20 system at least made most mechanics work in a logical way. Numbers were positive. Back in AD&D 2nd edition, negative numbers were better in some cases and worse in others. 3.5 at least made everything where you could look at a number and know if that was good or bad, but they wound up with like huge amount of feat bloats, and you had to plan your character out right at the beginning, because otherwise you would miss a very important feat at a certain level if you didn't have the exact stats that you needed to go through. And there was really not a lot of playing by the seat of your pants. You had to plan everything out, know everything in advance. And while it was a good system for being able to make two fighters that were completely different from each other, it was crunchy as heck. So
okay, so way more on the min-max or crazy character builder side, and less on the new player side.
very much so. There were forums I used to be a part of way back when 3 and 3.5 came out that would just be trying to break the game with the absolute silliest combination of rules, using all sorts of esoteric, splat matter from various places that you could make some absolutely insane, crazy, overpowered, immune to everything second level wizard that also happened to be a kobold, So fun times, but not very beginner friendly. It was probably the out of getting people into the game, 3 and 3.5 was the hardest that I got people into learning the system. 4 was a little bit easier because it was kind of, I hate to say it, but everyone else does, MMO style. But 5th edition is absolutely the best as far as bringing new people in and getting them versed in how tabletop games are supposed to work and be fun about it. So
Right. Yeah,
one of these
that makes
days,
sense.
though, I'm actually going to go gather up all the old 2nd edition books, and I'm going to run a campaign just because I'm masochistic. I just want to see the pain in people's eyes as they realize this is how we used to game back in the day.
Yeah. I was already tripped up enough because how AC worked back in the day was the lower the number, the better, wasn't it?
Yep, THAC0, 2-hit armor class 0. So, and that was actually the improvement. 1st edition AD&D that came out years before actually had lookup charts. You didn't know the rules. You couldn't do the math. It had basic lookup charts. You'd have to go across and then down to figure out. But yeah, so an AC of -10 was better because if you needed to roll to hit an armor class 0, then the 10 modified that to the better. So the better you rolled, the harder it hit. And yeah, it makes sense to those of us that played it, but it is so counterintuitive to the way the normal numbers work that it's insane. But, I've got a soft spot for it. Like I said, it's crazy.
Yeah, sounds like it. Because I got a buddy who's been playing since 1st, and yeah, he told me about THAC0, and I'm just blown away by it. But big numbers better.
Yeah. I mean, it was from an era where people were probably using slide rules to make math, so it doesn't make all that much. It's a pretty easy leap to understand why a bunch of old people that made the games were like, well, obviously everyone's going to have a lookup chart to figure this stuff out. We figured it out, and no. Replace it with simple numbers. I mean, I have a lot of complaints about the D20 system, but ease of use for beginners and being able to figure it out without having to have an abacus on hand, much better.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason I've been intimidated to try Warhammer, because the one game of Warhammer I saw, it looked really fun. Then I see one, because I'm just looking at all these minis in the terrain, I'm like, whoa, that's insane. You guys put some work in this. And I see a guy pull out a protractor, and I'm like, wait.
Yeah. I mean, for tabletop, I played Warhammer 40K starting in 3rd edition, and the most recent was 8th, and I've played pretty much all of them in between, and I got into it late. They removed a lot of the crazier type of stuff and streamlined the numbers in a very similar way, where back in 3rd edition, you had to look up a chart at the back of the book for hitting anything and doing damage, because it was a function of strength versus the target's toughness. And they eventually got rid of that, where you can do it in your head real easy. But everybody really loved charts for figuring out how to do these things. They just figured everybody would have those printouts. We used to have little laminated sheets we'd carry with us so that we could figure out, basic attacks. And so, I mean, thankfully, in modern times, people have gotten wind that the idea, maybe easier is probably a little bit better, not as accurate.
Yeah.
We're not looking for a reality simulator. We want people to have fun, not have a math degree. So it's gotten better.
Yeah, it really sounds like you got to have a expert in Excel course going on for you to really know how to work those.
Yeah, a lot of times back then, it was just impossible to do anything basic.
Now, you said also that there are things that you liked better about the system. I guess, what do you enjoy about 2nd edition compared to the D20?
With those splat books I was talking about, by the end of the era, I mean, 2nd edition came out in 89, I want to say, and then TSR folded and sold everything to Wizards, and I think 3.0 came out in 97, 99, somewhere in there, because I remember picking it up fresh in 2000 and it had been out a little bit. So it had a almost 20-year run that it was being continually printed, and everything you had your dungeon magazines that gave you, pretty cool dungeon type of sprawls, Dragon magazine that brought out new classes, new feats, new traits, new abilities. and then like 300 different splat books for rangers, bards, druids, things that we hadn't heard of back in the day. And all of them had a million classes. Half of them were trash because they didn't understand what balance was back then, nor do they really these days. But there was so much flavor. If you really wanted, you could build a character based off of the just absolute craziest bits and pieces by kit bashing all sorts of stuff from the various 300 odd books that had come out. And sure, no one would have any idea what you'd been doing unless they'd been buying every single book also. But it was, if you had a fighter and you had another fighter over here, odds were they were going to be completely different because they'd pulled from 50 different feats and abilities. And, this guy over here is using the Oriental Adventures and he's got nunchucks for a fighter. That was a monk weapon, but hey, why not, And then they started whittling that down a little bit in more recent versions and slowly expanding those books back out. But it didn't have nearly the amount of just depth that you could get in the old games. That wasn't necessarily a good thing. Just because there's a million different variants of monk doesn't mean that there's good monks. But at least you could be sure that everything that you played was going to be more or less unique.
Okay.
Yep. I like what Bitey Sampson said. That's the first version of Pay to Win.
Oh yeah, very much so. There were definitely the I remember very, very fondly, in fact, because everyone loved it, the Complete Guide to Elves had a class that was called Blade Singer that was just superior to everything else. And the second edition version of that was just, you're basically a full fighter. Also, by the way, you're a full wizard that can use spells through your sword, no penalties. There was just no reason to play a fighter or a wizard if you wanted to do both with better hit points, and also you could stab things in the face and have it detonate out in a fireball. So, you bought those books and you were just better than everyone else. Yeah. Pay to win is definitely apt in that case. I mean, it's not like they had the internet for any of that back then. You had to have the book in order to know what you were doing. So
yeah, that's what I was thinking is like nowadays, even if you don't have the book, you can find the content somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just shifted, because it's interesting you say that, because I heard a Dragon magazine, but I didn't actually hear the Dungeon magazine. So it's kind of like Unearthed Arcana and DM's Guild, and people just making homebrew content online. It's kind of become the new version of that, because I'll still hear that plenty of times where people just come to me and tell me these ridiculous stories of these builds that people made.
Yep.
Just other crazy homebrews that came up with, and they'd argue how they're...
Yeah, I mean, TSR was potentially a mismanaged company. It did wind up going under, and it foundered a lot of stuff. But the days that Dungeon and Dragon magazines both went under were very sad days. But yeah, I'm glad to see that they keep up the tradition of bringing out new content that's authorized through things like Unearthed Arcana. That's just, I mean, the game needs to live. If you don't keep bringing out new stuff that's not just better, but more varied, the game stagnates real quickly. We've seen that in a lot of other games. And so I'm really glad the 5th edition is taking a better page out of things than 4th edition did.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I will say one thing that I personally liked about the older editions that I kind of wish they do is like the complete guides that they give is, I feel like sometimes they're a little too vague on things where it's just really, you can insert your own idea of how you want this to be. And that's cool, but someone who has no idea what the Feywild is coming into it, me, like my Feywild's a very stitched together Alice in Wonderland and other otherworldly areas. That's how I kind of pictured a Feywild, but you had them books back in the day where like in 5th edition they'll give you like a little segment for dragons, but there'd be the whole I can't remember what it's called. I'm pretty sure it's 3.5 book. It was like the complete dragon book, and it was a whole book completely full of details on dragons.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, those splat books for 2nd edition, I mean, like you said, these days you get like a page for maybe orcs. Okay, that's pretty cool. But back in the day, half of the books that came out, literally half of those pages were just fluff. It was stories. It was, backstory. It was like Tolkien-esque. Okay, this elf married that elf, and they had 35,000 elves in this magical tree forest. And it gave you a framework to kind of build your own thing around. And it was wonderful. I mean, one of the big reasons I still play 40K to this day is that I just absolutely reading all of the fluff, because it's a world that I really enjoy, and going through all of the backstory that has absolutely nothing to do with gameplay is wonderful. And it feels like there's a little bit lacking on that. They're bringing it in some with like the adventures that they do, you get a little bit more feeling for like the Sword Coast and Baldur's Gate and all of that. But yeah, I really miss how a lot of that lore just kind of got swept aside. I mean, for a very long time when Wizards acquired everything, not all of the properties came across. So there were ancient systems that just vanished until recently. Ravenloft used to be its own thing. They finally brought that back in. Al-Qadim was this whole desert themed entirety that was vanished for a long time. Dragonlance was its own thing for a very long time. And Dark Sun was one of my absolute favorites. And then all of that vanished. There was just this great amount of lore that just vanished for a good 20 odd years that many people really should have had a chance to read. So some of it's coming back.
That's good. Yeah.
Yeah, I know they've been really on the Forgotten Realms lately, and I know that's been some people that have been kind of iffy on that, because Forgotten Realms, as far as it goes, probably because of Salvatore, Forgotten Realms is the most popular out of all of them, so it makes sense for them to do it. But I know it seems like they're branching out a little more now since they got the Complete Guide to Eberron, and they brought in Wildmount recently, and I don't know if it's confirmed or not, but people keep saying they're going to bring Spelljammer back in. But,
I would love Spelljammer to finally be coming back proper.
I'd like that,
Yeah.
and I think
Played the crap out of Spelljammer back in the day too.
yeah, because the new Baldur's Gate game is going to be centered around like actual more kind of spacey themed with mind flayers and stuff, since they actually showed their ships and stuff. Maybe that'll be a good segue to go into Spelljammer.
It wouldn't surprise me that they backdoor in something like that with the new upcoming game. So fingers crossed, I would love that, and they would probably get a lot of sales right off the bat if they did that, you know.
Oh, yeah. Because I will say, to their credit, they have done good with some things, like Volo's Guide to Everything and Morning Canaans. They're both pretty good books in the sense that they gave you a pretty good bit of content with some things like, that I know a lot of people are theorizing Spelljammer was next because the Githyanki, the Gifts of Rye, and the Hippo Gift were all mentioned in that book.
Mm-hmm. You start bringing in the astral plane stuff again. You start bringing, I would really like that. And to their credit, to Wizards' credit, 5th edition has been a lot more consistent and clear on the lore type of stuff, because I felt that 4th edition really kind of dropped the ball on a lot of that, and I think they learned from their mistakes. And I got to give props to the company. While a lot of people might crap on 4th edition, and my feelings on that are irrelevant on that, they seem to have picked up on what people really wanted for a game and gone full bore with it. So kudos to Wizards for doing that sort of a thing, because those, Volo's Guide and all of that are just absolutely wonderful, and it's great to see. It's not just books for the sake of making books and making money. There's actual craft in it again.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I really can't crap on 4th edition because that's the one I have absolutely zero experience in. Like, I know as a D&D person, I'm supposed to crap on it by default, but like, I'm just like, hey, if y'all enjoyed it, that's fine. Some of the things I heard about doesn't sound that fun, but
yeah.
I mean, hey.
For grognards like myself, I'm required by law to hate on it. But honestly, while the combat system wound up becoming so overly complex that a single basic encounter could take 4 hours, I really did enjoy the way that it codified everything with at-wills, encounter, daily, and status effects being very specific and very unique to various powers, instead of what a lot of D&D was for a very long time. I'm a fighter. Let's see, I'm going to look at my character sheet. I hit them with my great axe, So 4th edition definitely had some more flavor to it, but it was definitely bloated and lower on the roleplay. So I'm sure someone's going to take my role-playing DM card away from me for saying that, but I did enjoy some parts of 4th edition, just not enough to salvage the entire system, and I walked away from it for about 10 years. So
I gotcha. Yeah, that's one of the more controversial opinions I've noticed in the D&D community, but I mean, there's some interest in it, because actually, I recently had some 4th edition books that I sold before I got married just to get some extra cash, and a guy bought them all for like $20 each, I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah, not too bad. I think that there's a lot more people that like it. They just don't admit it, because you're not supposed to. It's just not the way that it's done. So, but yeah,
I don't know.
Controversial is very true.
I've noticed just in my experience of running a D&D meme page, I'll make fun of Rangers every now and then. At this point, I make fun of them so much just because I get such a big reaction every time I do. Like, the Rangers are the very loud minority.
Rangers are the Aquaman of the community type of a thing. Everyone makes fun of it, but then the people that really love it just get angry, riled up for something. You can't pick on Aquaman, man.
Yeah. Like, I can't think of a good... Aquaman's honestly a pretty good example of that. Because, yeah, every time I do, I will at least... Every time I make a joke about Rangers, you can look at my comment section, you'll find one person who lays out their levels 1 through 20 of their Ranger and just how cool they are and how much damage they do.
This is an interesting meme, but my 20-point thesis described my Ranger. You're going to have to eat your words because, no, I know exactly the type. Someone's just seething at this, and they've got their perfect character that they've been playing for 30 years that they're going to bring out. Excuse me, this exact point right here refutes all of this. This is just nonsensical. Thank you. Yep.
Yeah, like,
I know them.
And I just keep going on it because I made a video on it a long time ago where I was just like, the video is called Why I Don't Like Rangers, and I don't, but it's just because I want them to be better, and I feel like they just had a bad time mismanaging them, and that's it. Like, I just mentioned some things I think could be used to fix it. I wasn't really crapping on it at all. It's like, yeah, this is why I don't like it. I admitted my bias at the beginning because I was in a combat-only campaign, and in a combat-only campaign, Rangers fall behind pretty quick, but in roleplay and support, Rangers are amazing. So that was just kind of like, my argument was, hey, Rangers, they're not the best archer in the game, but they should be because they're Rangers.
Yeah.
That was my main argument, and people, I could tell they didn't even watch the video because I remember I posted it in one forum, and a guy, a minute after I posted it, started arguing with me in the comments.
That figures.
It's like, that's a 13-minute video. I know you didn't watch it that quick.
You didn't even see my argument first. You just disagreed.
Yeah, I've had that way too often, so it's like, you know what, I'm just going to keep making the joke at this point, because y'all ain't even going to listen to what I say anyways.
Gamers, they be opinionated.
Yeah. But yet they expect you to hear their part.
Exactly, yeah. Everyone expect what you have to. I'm right. You have to pay attention to the way that I said it. You know. No.
Yeah.
I feel like that's in every community.
Yeah, that's probably true. I suppose every fandom has its high level of toxicity like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like I wouldn't really call the Aquaman fans toxic, but like you're saying, yeah, there's the Aquaman, the really loud people that want their opinion out there. There's that in every group.
Very much so.
And at the minimum, there's the shippers in every group that just ruin it for everybody.
Shippers in every group that ruin, like, between characters that are playing?
No, not in D&D. I meant just
okay. I was like, because I think I would probably just delete my campaign and walk away forever if I had like fans that were shipping my players together or something like that. I would just delete.
The sad part is, in this day and age, if it gets like to the point where people are shipping your players, you might have made it, and that's sad.
A sad but true point.
Yeah,
okay, I revised my statement. I can't wait for that moment when everybody is posting on my Discord saying, when is character X going to get with character Y? I don't know, but we'll figure that out when we get enough donations, huh?
Yeah. You should show up to the next episode.
Oh, man.
Well, I don't really mind that as, I don't mind that concept. What I don't like is when they try and put people together, like the people behind the characters. That's creepy to me.
Yep. And the gamers, they also be creepy many times. So, been on both sides of that fence before. The time's passed. I have some horrible stories about that.
Yeah, I know. Kendall, one of the players from our group, was talking about that. That's apparently a big thing at Rooster Teeth, where apparently like people that weren't just shipping characters from the shows they play, they were shipping the people themselves, even when they were married. And they had to address it like, hey, stop that. My significant other doesn't like going online and seeing that.
Yeah.
Like, people are people.
Yeah.
Let them live their lives.
Yeah, the character thing, that's harmless. As annoying as shippers can be, it really is harmless at the end of the day.
As long as it's not overdone.
Yeah.
But that's with anything. Everything needs moderation.
That's fair. But back in it, so when did you get back in 5th edition, since you mentioned you took a big break from it, and what really got you back in?
Well, let's see. I was playing 4th edition, and I finally just had enough, and Pathfinder came out at that point, so, you know, it was billed as everything that you loved about 3.5 with less suck, and so a lot of us jump shipped on that, and it was reasonably okay. And then, what did they prefix it originally? D&D Beyond. And those PDFs were coming out, and there was a lot of talk that, you know, Wizards was actually workshopping it for a couple of years with players, and that feedback was going to be, you know, put in with this. It wasn't just, you know, Wizards is going to slap down a brand new version and you guys are going to like it or else. It was supposedly being workshopped among actual old school players, new school players. And so we grabbed my gaming group, grabbed some of the D&D Beyond stuff, and we started, you know, going through it, just looking at it and reading the rules, because we spend a lot of time dissecting rules of why is this one better than that. And okay, this doesn't seem too unreasonable. This actually seems like it could be okay at the very least. So tentatively, about a little bit after launch, I didn't buy the books right away. We were still in the middle of a campaign of Pathfinder, because that was basically our bread and butter at that point. And then eventually I picked up the books, and yeah, at first I was pretty down on 5th edition, feeling that it was just too watered down, that they'd taken out a lot of the stuff that I really wanted to be in there, and that they'd basically dumbed it down. But as time's been going on, I'm enjoying 5th edition an awful lot more. It's a lot more approachable, and the big thing that really gets me is that I don't have to stop every 5 minutes to look up a random rule and slow down the game because someone wants to jump a chasm, and I have to figure out how many feet they can jump with their specific, you know, agility skill and their acrobatics and agility and whatnot. I can just, okay, well, it's raining, you get disadvantage. So it took me a while, but I came back around to it, and honestly, I'm loving it. It may not be the most crunchy system, but in my day and age, I have to say that that's probably better, because it prioritizes fun and moving things forward over getting a very nitty-gritty level of detail on what you can do with the dice at any given time. Let me play the game first and let the rules follow behind, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's actually one thing. If you were to change anything about 5th edition, what would you say you change?
That's a really good question. At first, I was also down on the advantage disadvantage type of thing, but having played it long enough now, I really enjoy that one. So I would probably say that I would like the feat system to be redone. I know that they, feat bloat was a serious problem with 4th edition, 3.5, and Pathfinder derivations thereof, where there was just so many options. And so Wizards just kind of, okay, you can have feats, but they're optional, whatever. We pull them together. I would like to see feats be more flavor-based, because anytime you get to a point, it was really bad in 3.5. Every fighter had to take, the standard staples, because that was just the way that you played it. You always had power attack, and then you moved into like 2-weapon fighting, or, all of these specific things. And if it becomes mandatory to take, it's not a choice. It's the only way to play. I would like to see feats be reworked into a way that gives greater versionality to, if a fighter has this and a fighter has that and they have two different feats, they play entirely differently. I would really like to see that. Change it to flavor.
Yeah, I like that. I can agree with that one, definitely.
Yeah, I do like that too. Can you kind of go in more into that and how feats really function in the old games? Because I'm not too aware of how feats were in the old games, if they're any different than how they are now.
Feats were very mechanically based. So, like, it would always be the first levels of feats. There were feat chains that you would always wind up taking. Like, rogues would first take dodge, which gave you a +1 to your AC. You'd, I think it was dodge. Yeah, dodge gave you a +1 to AC. Then there was mobility that allowed you to move between attacks, which is now just, baked into 5th edition. And then you would eventually go into things like whirlwind attacks, so you could hit multiple things. And so every single thing was a single piecemeal mechanical bonus, or added the ability to do things. Like, move between attacks, you just couldn't do that. So you'd actually literally have to take a feat that would allow you to move between each individual attack, because back in 3.5, you could have 4, 5, 6 attacks depending on how things went. So everything was just a mechanical advantage rather than a flavor one. So, there were meta magic feats that allowed you to cast spells at higher levels or without material components, or silent so that you didn't have to say anything, or quicken so it was a free action. And it just got so many overwhelming choices, of which only about 75% were trash and about 25% were okay. So it just, they were just really bad ways of playing.
Okay. So they kind of function like skill trees in video games, where you kind of pick a tree to go down and go down it. Is that such?
Very, very similar. Yeah, I would say, like World of Warcraft style talent type of things, where once you've gotten to the bottom of the tree, every other character that's gone through that exact same tree basically functions identically. And there wasn't a lot of variation between. They were mechanical based advantages rather than flavor based ones. So it's not like, to use an analogy, warlocks in World of Warcraft. You could be Affliction, you could be Demolition, or you could be whatever the summoning one was. Nope, everything was basically everything was basically the same. The only difference was, did you hit them 6 times or did you hit them once with really high sneak attack damage? But otherwise, it was basically the same. So, yeah, feats made or broke a character in that, because if you didn't take the optimal feats, you were trash. It just didn't work.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Because I still deal with players in 5th edition that don't really know about feats or know how good they are. So that's an interesting twist on that.
Yeah, they wound up I want to say, combining a lot of different feats into individual ones, so that a lot of what used to be 4 feats in a chain are now just basically covered in one particular group. So that does work a lot better. They still don't give you a lot of variation between the different types, unfortunately. That's what I'd really like. I feel like feats are the most underwhelming part of it. Like, I'm just looking at some here. Dual wielder, you gain a +1 to AC when you were wielding separate melee weapon in each hand. Well, back in 3.5, there would be a specific feat that's like 2-weapon defense, and there would be another feat, 2-weapon fighting, that would give you, one would give you the +1 to AC, one would give you the +1 to defense, to attack. And so you'd have to take both of them to get that. Now they just kind of baked it in here. So it combined 4 or 5 disparate feats into one useful type of thing. So it is a little bit better. I would just like it so that, if I'm playing a rogue and my buddy's playing a rogue, that we're basically completely different depending on what feats we take. One might be stealthing through shadows, teleporting across, stabbing in the back. The other one might be sneak attack with dual wielding daggers, rapid fire, stab, stab, stab.
Okay.
So I would like to see that.
Yeah. I know, like, for me, I'm definitely a player that chooses feats over, like, the ability score improvements. Because feats really what make your character different from each other.
Yeah.
And to think that they could be even more unique is a fascinating idea for me.
Yeah. That's usually the advice I give to people as well, where I tell them to... What I do when I make my characters, I try and max out my combat stats to max first. Like, if I'm a fighter, I want, like, my strength to be max and have a pretty high con. But other than that, I focus solely on feats.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. Like, I want to start a character where I'm okay with its stats and be like, I don't need to upgrade it too much.
Maybe a magic item or two somewhere down the line to round out some things or buff the good one, but stick with feats. Yeah, I definitely think that at the very least, I don't know why they're optional. They really should have been given more priority with the way that they are, because they are way better than they used to be under 3.5.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And even 4.
Yeah, they're kind of back there in the book, too. Like, they're all the way in Chapter 6 past... backgrounds and items and in the very back of the customization options, so it's just a forgettable thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, it's part of the multi-classing and feats chapter. It's like, well, not a lot of people are probably going to be multi-classing to begin with. You're almost slightly penalized in 5th edition to do so. Not quite, but yeah, it's just they should have been given higher priority.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Mighty Samson mentioned something that I know a lot of people were talking on the last major UA Ranger redo. Wizards introduced the idea of interchangeable class and subclass features. I thought that was a neat idea to explore. And that one was a pretty interesting one. I felt like some of the things that added to classes were good, but some of them I saw could make for some very broken or weird things.
Yeah, some of those subclasses are really giving the flavor that really needed to be there. Pathfinder did it very well with what they called archetypes, where you would, and 5th edition does it very similar. Dan's Extremes, who plays on our Sunday night, plays a tiefling. I don't even remember what it's called, Fire Soul, I believe, and that's a from UA also. And that just, you know, you look at your
Phoenix
character,
Soul or something like that.
Phoenix Soul, that might be it, and you swap out just a couple of abilities with these new ones, and that is all I'm really looking for, is just giving me a different way to play the exact same thing. That makes it so that if I'm standing next to a buddy that has the same base class, we're functionally different, and I like that, and I hope that they go full bore. So if they're doing that with Rangers, then maybe they're really leaning into that there's something more than just mechanical. You're a Ranger, this is how you do it. You're a Rogue, this is how you do it. I would love to see that, more of that. So that's good to hear.
Oh yeah. And yeah, Pal said it's a Phoenix Soul.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what I was thinking, because I heard that, I'm like, that sounds awesome, because I love Sorcerer as just a mechanic, like how much you could do with their story, since their class pretty much ties directly into their story, more than likely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would like that, because that is a rule I do enforce when it comes to people playing stuff, is because I've had that happen too often, where two people would play the same class, and one person may have been fine with it, but the other person may have got a little salty when their same class could be doing a better job at what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
So that's pretty much a rule I set, where if two people are playing the same class in my party, it really needs to be they're building them completely different. And
yeah, you don't need two rogues picking locks and backstabbing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Right, like, different classes could do it a lot better, because I mean, like, a ranged fighter versus a up-close fighter, they're going to function mechanically really differently, and clerics are another one where you could play a cleric so many different ways, but some classes like barbarians, you don't have a lot of options except to run up, hit things, scream,
Yep.
repeat.
That was another nice change that they did wind up doing with 5th edition. 3.5, if you wanted to play a ranged fighter, sure, it was possible, but you had to start taking in some feats. Like, your core stat was always strength. There was nothing that you could do about dex without taking a feat to give you the ability to use your dex modifier for attacks regardless of anything else. So I'm glad that they made it so that you can finally choose for that, because it makes so much sense that you could have a fighter that could either be frontline or a ranged one, and they would have functionally different stats. So Wizards, again, seems to be paying attention to the good stuff, and I'm glad for that. I used to be the sort of thing where you'd have to blow 3 feats just to be viable compared to another character. So,
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Palace mentions multiclassing is definitely underrated. I mean, no one adventure can do everything, but multiclassing helps a little bit. And I agree. Anybody who's seen me played with me, they know I love multiclassing, because I hate playing the same thing as someone else. I will still have the same classes as someone else in the party, and I will play them completely differently than the other person. One, because, you know, how you mentioned you don't need 2 rogues lock-picking stuff. Each player, they kind of want to have something they're good at, something that they can provide to the party. So with multiclassing, I can at least dabble a little bit in, like, this class. Oh, I get sneak attack, but now I've grabbed, I don't know, I could grab into Ranger and make Ranger more viable by using that sneak attack.
mm-hmm.
Right. And honestly, I feel like 2 classes in particular that I feel like you should always that are really good for multiclassing is Warlock and Ranger. Because by themselves, you have to build them really specifically to be good, but mixed with other things, their unique abilities are amazing to stack up other things.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Especially Warlock, since at level 1 they usually get a decent bit of stuff.
Yeah.
Like one of my character builds that I did, we were doing the dragon campaign, like the level, like low level one, and I multi-classed. Is it
Horde
Hordes?
Dragon Queen.
Yeah, that one. And I multi-classed a fighter, 1 fighter, 2 in ranger, and rogue. And the reason for this was getting the fighting styles. So dex build, had a shield, got protector, got shield mastery or something like that, and then also the sneak attack. And I had 19 AC, very hard to hit, and it was after my first character died, which was a blade singer.
Yes.
Yeah.
I like
Dude.
that they've kept that around over the years.
Oh yeah, who died to the
it's,
one-on-one battle.
It was added into Sword Coast Adventure Guide. It's canon in 5e.
Very excellent.
It's a fun class. I like it.
I think they've known for 25, 30 years that was a player favorite, so they made sure to keep it around. They've gotten rid of things like Spelljammer and Dark Sun, but they've kept around that dang class because that's what people really care about.
Mm-hmm.
It's also very fun, so.
It's one class I have not had to multi-class to feel viable in.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. I find that funny because I didn't even know about Dark Sun until the Big Show, the wrestler, actually mentioned it.
Mm. Dark Sun
Yeah,
was
he,
one of my favorite campaigns back in the day.
Did you ever see the game he played in with Joe Manganiello and Travis Willingham?
I have not.
Okay, yeah, they had a game called Jox Machina where it was them guys and this other, like CrossFit's most athletic man over 40 were all playing a game of all tanks, and the Big Show was playing a half giant fighter, I think it was.
Okay, that sounds awesome.
Oh yeah, it was a half giant fighter. Travis Willingham's character from Critical Role, Grog, Joe Manganiello's Paladin to Tiamat, and an Ozmar Paladin, and it was them fighting a bunch of undead dragons run by Mike Merles. It was awesome.
Oh, that sounds good.
It was well worth watching. I'll have to link it to you later. But yeah, he just mentioned that. It's like, we do it differently in Dark Sun. And I was like, Dark Sun. I looked it up. I'm like, oh, that sounds cool.
Yeah. I mean, it was one of the more unique settings, at least. I mean, say what you want about Forgotten Realms, but it's a fairly bog standard fantasy that you would expect when you think of the words fantasy D&D. But Dark Sun was completely different in every way, shape, and form, if albeit very, very harsh on the players. So,
Yeah.
But some people definitely enjoyed that. It had flavor.
Yeah, Dark Sun was a pretty barren wasteland-like setting, wasn't it? I've only looked a little bit into it.
Yeah, the whole concept was that magic completely drained the life out of the entire planet, leaving it a dry husk. And the only bits of magic you can do if you're a wizard is you can either be a preserver to attempt to not do that, but magic innately drains life from things around it. So magic's outlawed. Bad wizards generally are, destroying the planet. Good wizards are weaker because they're trying to preserve. And then there's these, gods keep their power. They're city-state demi-lord type of things. It was pretty interesting. Metal's completely rare. There's Thrykeen, mantis people and stuff. But yeah.
I'll have to look that up. Sounds like some Mad Max style world that I dig.
Yes, exactly. Also, basically, everyone's a slave, and if you didn't start as a slave, something's being wrong. All sorts of crazy. It was just like one of those standard accepted things, like how pretty much every Elder Scrolls game starts with you in a dungeon, locked up. It's basically the same type of a thing. If you played Dark Sun, you were a slave.
Interesting. I'll have to look in that, because I know Spelljammer is one of the other settings I was really interested in, but I'll have to add that to the ones I'm really interested in, because I kind of dig Eberron and Spelljammer really interested me because I've always wanted to run a setting that is kind of real futuristic, since Star Wars was my jam as a kid. It's what I really grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
So I've been interested in making a setting in a game like that. But Dark Sun sounds really cool as well. To do a game like that.
They brought it back for 4th edition, as I recall, but I don't think there's anything been in the works for 5th edition. As I seem to think about it, I think the reason they didn't get it until 4th edition for a while was because the rights were just kind of in that ether when TSR went tits up, and no one really knew who owned what or who had to pay who for the rights. And well, we'll see if they bring it all back. I mean, you know, it's only been, what, 5th edition's been out 3 years, 4 years maybe, so.
Like I said, we've been playing 5th edition for 7 years now, and I think it was...
Oh, it's that long, okay.
Yeah.
I think it was coming out around that time. It's
Dang.
just really hit. It's a really popular surge, so I can kind of imagine the last few years. But yeah, so when all them settings were really coming out, was all that in 2nd edition where there was so much being put out at once? Because I think about it, there's a lot of settings that really haven't been explored lately, where all them really in there in that age where there's all these magazines and stuff printing out all the campaigns like crazy.
Yeah, I mean, there are various areas where there were so many books for so many different campaigns that Forgotten Realms itself probably had a stack of 10-foot tall books detailing every little area of minor parts of the world that were just so bad. I mean, some of that, you know, you got your Sword Coast, Baldur's Gate, you've got the Icewind Dale area, but yeah, they would just put out an entire box set that was like this thick with maps and characters and plot hooks for random forest number 3. And yeah, it was overwhelming for a lot of people. There was just so much stuff. No one knew what was good because there was no online reviews and you couldn't buy it all, but some people definitely tried. 2014. Okay, look at that.
Oh, yeah. So yeah, we got in right at the beginning then.
Now it looks okay. I think I bought my book 4 years ago, so it would have been just 2 years after the games came out. So we were playing with the D&D Beyond rule PDFs before that a little bit, but yeah, I guess I missed it by about 2 years.
Interesting.
Kind of gone full bore into it now, though.
I didn't realize it was that fresh whenever I got into it.
I want to say we were jumping in around fall of 2014, so we were coming in around 2015 then.
Yeah.
That's
good
so
timing.
we were coming in a few months late.
Yeah, but that's whenever everyone's like getting into it and like know the rules and can help us get into it. So
I know I always felt like we were coming into it late, so that's interesting that we were there for the beginning of it.
yeah, it's already 7:55. We normally end the show off with funny stories of D&D. So if you have anything, feel free to share.
Funny stories. I've got cringeworthy stories. I've got funny.
We love them all.
You know, 30 years, there's something in there, but
yeah, it could just be like a story you really enjoy, like your favorite D&D story to tell, whether it's funny, it's cringeworthy, or hilarious, whatever. Because, like you said, we've heard them all.
One of my absolute favorites was 3.5, where the all the players were contracted to do, it was a very stereotypical adventure, go kill this dragon up in this mountain. So rather than go through the dungeon, they reasoned, well, dragons fly, right? Dragons don't go through dungeons. They go through a gigantic hole in the side of the mountain. Why don't we fly and do that? So they got a cleric to cast Windwalk, which allowed them to turn into a gaseous form and fly at 60 miles an hour, or in their normal form at 60 feet per round. And that was pretty good. So, and it lasts 8 hours, so they got it all cast, and they flew on off to the mountain there. And the dragon was sitting there inside the ledge looking at its hoard of stuff, and one of the players, now I got to preface this with another explanation. Has everybody seen the movie Reign of Fire?
I have not.
I'm not.
Ancient movie, Christian Bale, Matthew McConaughey, dragons come back to the world in a post-apocalyptic thing, and at the very end of the movie, Matthew McConaughey's character has this gigantic axe that he climbs a tower, and he lunges off of it with this primal roar, swings overhead, and he goes right into the dragon's mouth, hacking at it to kill it. And so ever since then, in my campaigns with all of the players that I've had through all the years, we call that sort of thing where you jump attack at a dragon without regard of safety, Matthew McConaughey at the dragon. So one of the players who is ready to do this decides that he's going to initiate combat of this dragon by Matthew McConaughey at the dragon from his Windwalk ghost form. Unbeknownst to him, the dragon, if you attacked it from the rear, had an attack of opportunity that would allow it to tail whip at the attacker, and if it succeeded, would knock it back 60 feet, which would be right back outside the mountain. So he sailed through the air, screaming and swung at the dragon's ass just as the dragon just flicked him with the tail and knocked him right back out the hole and down the side of the mountain. Thankfully for him, he could reestablish the wind walk as a full round action. Nonetheless, he thought he was going to be the most badass before this dragon just and flicked him right down the mountainside. So that was one of my favorite moments, because you take something that looks like it's going to be epic and then nope, completely done.
Oh.
Then the dice happen.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. They did eventually wind up finishing that encounter by taking a rod of the immovable rod where you click the button and it just stays right there, and getting the dragon to open its mouth, ramming it onto its teeth and clicking the button, and it failed its strength check to move the thing. So it got locked there while they beat the ever-loving crap out of it. So inexplicable, because I have a tendency to I roll my dice openly when I'm playing in real life so that players can see my failures and my successes all up front so that I can look them in the eye and roll a 13 on this, you're dead. And failed the strength check on a dragon, and the whole thing was just pinned to the floor. So despite the failure of my bud getting kicked right back out the mountain, they did succeed by pinning a dragon to a floor with an immovable rod.
Nice.
Love it.
That's probably one of my favorites we've heard. That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and I am definitely going to have to look into that Rain of Fire movie, because that honestly sounds awesome.
It's a miserable. It's an okay movie, but it's Christian Bale, Matthew McConaughey, and dragons, and they're hamming it up. I mean, it's not a great movie, but it's a very fun movie.
I just want to see a barbarian Matthew McConaughey. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, he's all shaved head, and he's hunting dragons because they destroyed his family and, well, technically the entire planet. And at the very end, in order to get so that Christian Bale can take the critical shot, he distracts the dragon by jumping at its throat to destroy it. And so now, every time you jump and attack at a dragon, it's Matthew McConaughey off of whatever into the dragon. It's a decent movie, and it's at very least inspiring for the way that D&D should be played, with absolutely no regards and a lot of screaming.
Well, why don't you reintroduce yourself to the people who've came in late, and also feel free to shout out anything you want, anything that you do, where they can find you.
All right. I'm MortanisTV. Every other Sunday, I do the Hobo Slayers D&D, we'll call it campaign type of a thing. A couple of the players are actually in here tonight. Wave hello from home, people. And then I stream D&D Wednesday nights, and I do map making Mondays and Fridays. I'm hoping to get another campaign up and going, but the brand new campaign, 5th edition homebrew that I am starting up with 6 players will be starting next Wednesday night, the 20th, and it is going to be crazy awesome. So stop on by my Twitter at MortanisTV or my Twitch, also MortanisTV. Say hi.
All right.
All right, Bob.
His information will be in the chat, and if you're watching here on YouTube, it will be down in the description below.
Yeah, thanks for coming, buddy. This is great.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, everyone, thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you all next time. Bye, everyone.